and welcome to this live. I feel like it has been the longest time since I done it live on Instagram, like probably COVID times. But I wanted to come on and chat to you tonight about my health journey and how Simprove has helped me since my IBD diagnosis. So I'm going to be joined by Oonagh O'Hagan, who is a pharmacist and Meaghers Pharmacy MD, and she is going to chat to us a little bit about the microbiome because she has a wealth of knowledge on the subject. So I think this will be really informative. So obviously, personally, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis back in 2022. So I have focused on my gut health a lot since then because it really affects your overall health. And I have found such great benefits with taking Simprove since then. So for me, specifically, I feel like Simprove has helped with really painful bloating that I was suffering with before and just really settling down my digestive system. So Simprove have a discount off their programs at the moment. They have 25% off their 4 and 12 week programs to celebrate World Microbiome Day. So I will link that on my stories after the live, but right now I am going to add Oonagh to the live so we can start. So let me just... work.
Hello, Dominique.
Oh, hello. I thought that wasn't working there.
No, you always get palpitations.
I was like, oh my god, I'm going to be here on my own.
It's always nerve-wracking. I actually did one of these with, Ella Mills, and she's like got a couple of million followers.
Oh god.
And I invited her on, it wouldn't work. I was like,
oh god. That's what I thought was happening to me there.
I wasn't able for it, but it was during COVID and it was really bad weather. And like the Wi-Fi was down in the house or something.
That's when everyone was doing them, was during COVID. That's what I said at the start of this. Yeah.
Exactly. And there were so many people on at the same time, the whole thing crashed. I was like, oh my god, of all the nights, like
I know.
How are you? How's
yeah, good.
Glowing. You look beautiful.
I'm out in the conservatory now, so I have all the good light.
Oh, well, listen, come here. You're amazing. Yeah, amazing. And it's great, like, to have you talk about Simprove. Like, I know that you've had your own personal journey with us as well. So really interesting, even for me to even find out that, because I don't know the full story. It's amazing. It's an amazing product. And listen, thanks for the invite on to have a chat to your audience as well. Because I know loads of people have loads of questions about it. So yeah, I'm here. And if anybody, I would say just before the live, like loads of people don't like asking questions, because maybe they're on a medicine and they don't like to say on the live, I'm on this particular type of medication or whatever. So afterwards, if anybody wants to DM me directly, feel free to do that. I'll come back to you definitely within 24 hours. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. Honestly, don't ever feel like, oh, I should know the question. This seems a bit stupid. Don't feel like that. Just send me a message, because I would rather that you got the right information rather than go and investing in this, because it is a bit more pricier than other probiotics. So that you know exactly what you're doing before you even make that commitment. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so people actually sent us in questions for today. I actually printed them out earlier so that I'd have them in front of me. So I don't know whether they sent you in some as well. So I know one of the first ones for me was when and why did I start Simprove, basically. So I started it back in 2022. I know I told you this before, but it was obviously before I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. I knew I had something wrong with my gut at the time, so I'd done a lot of research online, and Simprove came up like time and time again. So I read lots of reviews online about it, and I knew a lot of people that I actually followed online were taking it. So I started taking it then around 2022, and I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in the October. So I was in a flare at the time. I didn't even know what flare was. I didn't know what ulcerative colitis was. So I just wanted to take something that would help my condition and help my gut health. So I've been taking it for the last 3 years now.
Okay, and what did you notice change for you, Dominique?
Two of the main things I felt changed for me was bloating. Like I had really severe bloating. Like whether I ate food or like hadn't eaten in a couple of hours, the bloating was really extreme, and I just felt my digestive system was just so unsettled in general. Like, do you know when people are hungry and their stomach would grumble? I felt like my stomach was like that constantly. It was constantly making noises. I felt like I always just had a hot water bottle on my stomach or heat patches. And like it's so mad to think about it now because it was so different at the time and so bad. It's like completely different now. But yeah, I felt like they were the two main benefits I saw from taking it.
Yeah, and that's what most people will say, you know, that, and most people will also say, I thought that the way I was living was normal because
Mm.
people get used to thinking that that is normal, and it becomes like their new
You just
normal.
adapt, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
you do. Yeah, exactly. And then you kind of like you're just so stuck in it all of the time for such a long period of time, and I'm sure you felt like that as well. So then people kind of go, oh my God, after maybe 12 weeks of this or even like less, that's not normal. How I've been like living my life is not normal. I'm not supposed to bloat after, you know, every carb I eat, or I'm not supposed to be, you know, whether it be constipated or loose bowel. Some people have, you know, one or the other, sometimes fluctuate between both, or the pains or the reflux or the cramps or just that sluggish feeling as well, Dominic. We hear that all the time, that lack of energy. They feel really full. They feel like food lies in their stomach for, you know, or in their gut for a long, long period of time. So people get used to thinking that that's normal, and it's not
Mm.
normal. It's just not normal. So yeah, I think the main thing about Simprove, I guess, is that whole anti-inflammatory action that you've seen, that getting rid of the bloating and the cramps and the pains, all comes from basically the little bacteria in Simprove populating the large intestine. And what they do is they produce the four bacteria in this product were chosen by a microbiologist who worked with Barry, the founder. He's a farmer, and he was making this actually for his cattle, for his cows, like nothing to do with human health whatsoever. But the reason that he wanted to do this is he didn't want to feed his cattle antibiotic-laced pellets, and he wanted to feed them like a natural food substance. So he was germinating down barley, mushing it all up, and it would go off after about 5 or 6 days. So a friend of his who happened to be a microbiologist said, if you pickle it, put like bacteria in it, it'll bring down the pH so it's acidic, and therefore the bacteria won't grow in it, so you'll get longer out of it. And that's what he was doing. He was just a farmer doing this for his cattle. Loads of other farmers then were coming to him, kind of going, what are you doing with your cattle? Because they were healthy, they were surviving mad cow disease, all of this type of stuff. And then eventually, like loads of pig farmers were coming to him, ostrich farmers, because he's from a big farming district in England, if that makes sense. And eventually, a really eminent vet, came to him and said, you need to take this to humans, because if it works for pigs, we're the closest animals to pigs, human beings actually. And so because he didn't know anything about hormone or human health, he didn't want to launch the product until he had approval from a gastroenterologist, or, you know, until somebody checked it out and seen it was A, safe to do so, and B, that it would actually have some effect. And he was quite happy just farming, like he did, but he felt that your man sort of said to him, you have an obligation to do this because so many people struggle with their gut health, and if it really works for animals, then, you know,
Yeah, it
you're
could work for us.
yeah, it could, yeah, exactly. So he felt that, okay, I should do this more than anything else. But he's a really lovely gentleman. So anyway, he knocked on like loads of gastroenterologist doors with a bottle, like with like liquid, kind of saying, would you test this in your patients? Like, it's just mad when you think about it. But eventually a professor said to him, I'm doing a study to basically prove that probiotics don't work. I'm sick of all of this marketing. I'm sick of, you know, them making all these claims. And if you're happy for me to put your product into that survey along with 8 other probiotics, I'll include it. And he said, yeah, because that was like the first time anybody spoke to him. And literally, like, he was running this clinical trial over 12 weeks. And because he was convinced that it took that long for any of these things kind of establish a microbiome. And anyway, after the 12 weeks, he phoned Barry to say, listen, I'm not sure what's in this or how it works, but you need to come in and explain, because all the patients that he had on Simprove showed significant improvements. And now we know that it's really because the microbiologist chose these 4 bacteria that are in Simprove because they produce this product called lactic acid, and the lactic acid feeds the other bacteria already in your gut, Dominique, and that's why people see such a huge improvement so quickly with Simprove, because it's not just delivering these 4 bacteria, if that makes sense. It's almost like these bacteria actually have a little rucksack with loads of food in their back, and when they get into the large intestine, they kind of throw out that food, that lactic acid, and that feeds all your other good bacteria that are actually there, if that makes sense. So you have this kind of explosive reaction of good bacteria multiplying really fast. And what they produce is short chain fatty acids. We don't really talk about these products, but they're real molecules that metabolites that are produced in our body naturally if you have these good bacteria. And what they do is they take inflammation down. So when you have lots of these in your gut lining is less inflamed. So basically butyrate in particular, butyrate, acetate and propionate are the three main ones that these bacteria produce. But butyrate heals up the gut wall. So for somebody like your good self who has ulcerative colitis, your gut wall would naturally be very inflamed and very, very ulcerated. And as a result of that, you can have some bleeding. Same for Crohn's patients. Same for maybe people who have diverticulitis or even IBS, really chronic IBS. So very inflamed, very to the stage where it's actually ulcerated, and butyrate really heals up the gut wall and takes that inflammation down. So that's why you see all of these real anti-inflammatory effects, if that makes sense. And as a result, the bloating reduces, and also the cramps and the pains and that acidic kind of feeling all reduces as well. So bloating is the number one thing that most of our customers will say. And if you look at our reviews online, I think there's over 3,000 at this stage, and they're all verified reviews, like people holding a bottle of Simply, you know, like so. And that's if you looked at them all kind of like, you know, and did a quick glance, it's bloating, reflux, cramps, pains, constipation, diarrhea, because it just regulates your gut motion. So people can go, how can it work for constipation and diarrhea? It just gets your gut working the way it should do, because your gut's just a big long muscle, and if it's going too slow, you get constipated, but if it's going too fast, you have diarrhea. And all it does, it just regulates the way it should move, that smooth muscle action of it. It's called peristalsis, gets it to work properly. So if you've got diarrhea, it'll slow that down so that you don't have diarrhea. But if you have constipation, it kind of speeds it up a little bit so that you're not as constipated. So that's
so it works for both.
Yeah, it works for both, which is really unusual.
Which I actually didn't know. I thought, because obviously I was only coming at it from my point of view, whereas I wanted like less frequent bowel movements. I didn't realize it could be for constipation as well, because obviously,
And that was my journey, like, because like how I discovered this is I have really bad IBS, and it used to really flare up. Particularly, it wasn't food that was my trigger, it was stress. So when I was growing up and doing my GCSEs, I'm from the north, and my A levels, my belly used to be like out like huge, like, you know, people would say to me, when's the baby due? And I like, you know, when I was studying for my A levels, like that's like you're leaving, sir. It was just really, you know, I think people don't realize the physical, you know, pain of this, but actually the emotional pain and the, you know, the mental health, the impact of all of this. So, but during my exams in college, oh my God, took a whole new level, because obviously I wasn't eating properly then. Do you know what I mean? And I was partying, and you know, like
and stress and obviously alcohol.
Exactly.
Like I know they affect us so much for me. So like if I know I'm gonna go through, because obviously you can do courses of Simprove, like the 4-week or the 12-week course, but like for the last couple of years I've nearly taken it constantly. Now there was certain times I probably had a break and then went on it, but I know I would always take it coming up to Christmas, where I know I'd be eating more or going out a lot more, or holidays. Like now I was taking it while I was on holidays, because I know the food would be different. I would be drinking more than I usually would on holidays, because I don't really drink alcohol that much at home. So at them times I know I need to have it with me.
Yeah, exactly. So anytime you have, I think, a more stressful life, or you're eating rich food, or
traveling. Like even going on a plane was actually, like, I found I would flare up a lot worse, like just going on a plane. I remember Googling it, and it said like that can affect it, going on a plane, and the different
zones, when you travel across different time zones, because that can have an effect on your female hormone health, which has also an effect on your gut health as well, because your hormones affect your microbiome and vice versa as well. So even the time of your cycle for women actually can really flare it up, and you'll notice like those few days before your period is due, you can be very, very bloated. And you know, so not only have you got the PMS symptoms, but actually you do have a lot of IBS symptoms have a flare up as well, and that's simply because your estrogen and progesterone affect your microbiome. And there's like 10 little bacteria in your microbiome that we call your estroblome. So they basically make up this estroblome that kind of regurgitate estrogen and progesterone and throw it, like almost recycle it and put it back into your system again. But if you're lacking those bacteria, then you're not going to have the full benefits in terms of, you know, your female hormones. And this is where sometimes we see, for example, there could be even fertility issues, there could be PCOS, endometriosis, these inflammatory conditions can actually be really improved if you actually look at your microbiome. And actually, we're doing an event tomorrow night, Dominic, in Smock Alley. And we have a panel, 3 professors coming from the APC Centre down in Cork. And one of those ladies, Siobhan O'Mahony, she's done amazing work in mental health. You know, how do you improve your mental health by improving your microbiome, along with Professor John Pryan. He's like this global expert that's based in Cork. But now she's moved on to this new body of research where she's actually looking at how you can improve your microbiome to improve female hormone health, whether you're going through perimenopause or whether it be through PMS or PCOS or endometriosis. These 2 things are completely linked together. So reduce inflammation in your gut and you will reduce inflammation elsewhere in your body.
Yeah,
so
it's not just your gut, like it's your overall health.
100%, 100%. So yeah, it's fascinating. Like, I think we're only really discovering the tip of the iceberg because we can't see these little bacteria that are in our gut, and you know they're microscopic, so you don't pay any attention to things that you don't see. But actually, if you were to gather them all up and hold them in your hand, they weigh heavier than the human brain. It's like a 2-kilogram weight. There's more bacteria in us than there are human cells in our body. Like, so it would be very naive. Yeah, I know, it's mad. Like, I just think that people don't give them the credence that they deserve, and people don't understand what they do. And when you hear bacteria in you, kind of think, you get a bit of an ick, don't you?
Yeah, because you think, oh, I
disgusting.
shouldn't have any bacteria in me, but
Exactly.
actually it's good to have good bacteria.
Oh yeah, these good bacteria, they make your B vitamins, so really important for your energy. They make vitamin K, really important for clotting. They make all those short chain fatty acids I talked about that take inflammation down in your body. They make your neurotransmitters, so like serotonin, your happy hormone. You know, 95% of that, Dominique, is made in your gut. So this is why there's a huge link between your gut health and mental health.
Yeah.
So, you know, because so many antidepressants, that's what they're doing. They're SSRIs, so serotonin uptake, you know, blockers or whatever. But you know, you're trying to block that uptake of serotonin in your body when you take these antidepressants. But actually, the serotonin is made by your gut bacteria. So we know that if you can actually really improve your microbiome, we know that helps with your mood and also reducing anxiety. So, you know, they make 50% of your dopamine, you know, which is for your motivation. They make 50% of your melatonin for sleep. You know, so there's a massive link between your microbiome and your sleep as well. Massive link between your microbiome and your skin health, you know, and we see that time and time again. And you know, and even
and they were things I really suffered with as well, was my skin before, that I didn't know, and not sleeping, but I didn't know they had any like correlation between my gut. Like, obviously my gut was in flare at the time, but I didn't realize that all of these things were being affected by that. And I was so anxious at the time, obviously because I knew I was unwell, and I was worried about, like, would this get any better? And then obviously when I got the diagnosis, I felt like there was a bit of power in that knowledge because I was able to research a bit more on it, find products like Simprove. And before that, like, I thought the worst. Like, I didn't know what was going on with my own body. But when you have the knowledge behind it, you can obviously help yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's worse when you're in limbo and you don't
Yeah.
have something, because
Yeah.
absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. You think the worst. You're going to think, oh, it's something like bowel cancer or whatever.
That's what I thought. Anytime I googled it, that's what came up. So I was actually relieved to get that diagnosis of ulcerative colitis, even though I didn't know anybody that had that. I'd never heard of it before. So when I was researching it, I thought, like, how do I have this? But it's actually quite common, and just nobody really talks about it because, like, obviously it's a bit of an embarrassing, like, condition. Like, you don't, I know, but that is why, and that's why I think I took so long to go to the GP about it, because I was just like, I was embarrassed to even tell it to a doctor, which, like, is mad when I think of about it now, because I could have helped myself along so much faster. Like, I let it get so bad to the point where I couldn't leave the house, or couldn't go to the gym, couldn't go for a walk. I was afraid to do a 5 minute drive in case I was too far from a bathroom. So that I let myself get to that point was awful. That's why I think, like, doing like chats like this is so important, to normalize it a bit more, that it's not embarrassing, like, it's a condition like any other one, and like, you can treat it and have a very normal life. Like, I think I have a really normal life now, which I didn't think I would ever have at the time.
Yeah, and and fair play to you for doing that, because it takes a lot of courage to step out and say this is how I lived, and nobody likes talking about, say, their toilet movements. Nobody likes saying, oh, I was going to the bathroom 10, like I was talking to Anna last
20
night.
to 30 times a day.
Yeah,
Like it was
yeah,
insane.
yeah. Well, I was talking to a guy last night, and he had sent me a DM saying, "Would you mind giving me a call? This is my number." So I don't know what it was. Rarely would people ask me on DMs, but would you give him a call? Especially guys, like So it's usually girls who follow me. Anyway, when I rang him, he just said, and I just want to say, I had to just speak to you. I just want to say a huge thank you, because yesterday was the first day in his life that he was able to go to his son's football match. So his son was 8, and he had never been able to go to any of his soccer matches because there was no public toilets, or he was scared there would be no public toilets because he has ulcerative colitis, just like yourself. And he was going to the bathroom, he said, up to, it could be any, on a good day 18 times a day, on a bad day 30 times a day. And he was always afraid to get caught short, but there was no way that he could last the entire soccer match. But he had been on some proof only for 4 weeks, Dominic, and he had the courage, I suppose, after 2 weeks to go for a little bit of it and then get in the car and come home. But then the last time, like yesterday, he stayed for the entire match, and he seen his son score a goal, and he was like crying on the phone.
Oh my God, that's actually making me a bit emotional.
Exactly.
Because it is mad. You do just adapt to it, and you can't do normal things that everybody else would take for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
It was during like a couple of weeks ago, we were down in Cork and we went to the beach for the day. And I was sitting on the beach and said to Paddy, imagine 3 years ago, there's no way I would have went to a public beach just for fear of, would there be a bathroom there? How far were we away from one? Like, yeah, it's mad.
Yeah, and your dad, right? He exactly said that as well. He was going like, this just became my life, and I was going to just accept it for the rest of my life. Only it was like his wife's sister, so whatever that relation is, had said, oh, you should try this, whatever, and gave him some for him to try. And he said, like, within 2 weeks, he noticed a big difference. He was down to maybe going like 6 or 7 times, and then within 4 weeks, it was just like completely life changing. So, but all of this is just, listen, down to that anti-inflammatory effect. That's all, because whenever you have like IBD, like yourself, or like somebody who has got Crohn's as well, there's just a lot of inflammation going on in the gut. And I'm sure from speaking to your gastroenterologist, they don't really know what causes IBD. There's a huge part of it that's genetic as well. So it's it's not something that you've done. And a lot of
I thought that, like, I remember saying, was it like the foods I ate, or what was it? And they were like, no. But there isn't a lot of information behind what actually causes it.
No, absolutely not. So, and I know a lot of patients feel like the guilt. Like he said that himself to me yesterday. He's going, I used to beat myself up saying it was the way that I lived my life when I was younger, and I've done this, and this is my penance nearly now that I can't do this with my children. But he just felt so relieved that that basically, just by reducing that inflammation, he could have confidence to know he's not going to get caught short, and that he could now go and see his son scoring the goal, but not even for him, but for his son to have his daddy there. Yeah. And he was just like, he came off the pitch crying, and like, I mean, I was crying at the end of the phone call.
I think so.
So, it is amazing to be able to help people like that.
Yeah, and hear a story like that like has changed his life so quickly.
Yeah.
And do you know, with the courses, I actually had a question, like, because I knew when you were coming on that I could ask. Do you know the way there's a 4-week program and a 12-week program?
Yeah.
So, like, as I said, I nearly take it continuously. Like, are you better off taking a 12-week program and taking a break? Or, like, what's the best way to actually take it?
Yeah, so I would say for anybody like yourself to constantly take it, you don't need to take the full dose though, Dominique.
I do take the full dose, yeah.
Really what you do is do the 12-week program initially, right, and get your microbiome back to what it should be. They have clinically proven that after 12 weeks it's back topped up to what it should be. And I always think of it as a full glass, right, and your bacteria is up to the top. Anytime that you might be a little bit stressed, it might dip down a little bit. Say if you went on an antibiotic, it would go down hugely. Say if you were going through a really stressful period in your time, it would go down. But then you take some improve, it tops back up again. It's constantly going up and down, if that makes sense.
Just rebalancing.
Yeah, just depending on what's going on in your life. Say, for example, if you went into a flare of your ulcerative colitis, or if someone goes into a flare of Crohn's, then it's going to drop again because you've got like a lot of inflammation going on. So your body will nearly tell you, you know, because how you'll know is you'll
Like how you
have a
feel.
return
Yeah.
of those symptoms again, a return of the bloating again. So when your body tells you that, you need to like listen to it and top it back up again. But in between times, I would say for people who may not have ulcerative colitis or any type of IBD, but are maybe just going on it to really after an antibiotic, for example, because after each antibiotic, it takes a year for your microbiome to come back naturally. So, because antibiotics, of course, knock out the good bacteria as well as, you know, say if you're taking for a chest infection, it doesn't know what's a good bacteria or a bad bacteria. So after every antibiotic, you should really take, you know, something like a course of Improve just to top up your good bacteria again. And people often ask me, do I take it with the antibiotic? Yes, absolutely, because every time you take an antibiotic, it's knocking down your microbiome, it's knocking it down. Whereas at least if you're topping it up whilst taking the antibiotic, then it's not going to get down to the bottom of that glass, if that makes sense. So what I would say is everybody is different, Dominique, depending on, number one, are you taking it because you have inflammatory bowel disease or IBS, or you know, there's something else. Maybe a lot of people take it for their skin, nothing to do with their gut, maybe for acne or rosacea or eczema or whatever. So is there something that you're actually taking it for? If not, and you're only just taking it to top up your microbiome because you've had an antibiotic, or you just want to do a 12-week program just to get your microbiome working effectively again, then you don't need to stay on it. You can keep it topped up by eating really well and eating lots of fibrous foods, and we say 30 different plants per day, because those different plants feed different bacteria. So the bacteria need fiber in order to grow and multiply, and we now need anywhere between 30 and 50 grams of fiber a day, depending if you're male or a female, and depending on your size really, but up to 50 grams. That's a hell of a lot of fiber, and nobody really is taking that amount of fiber. So really what I would encourage people to do is look at the fiber intake that they're taking, track it. You can go onto the Gut Stuff, they have a little tracker of fiber, you can download it for free, you can just track it for a week and just see, actually, am I taking, some people come back to me and say, I'm taking like 15 grams of fiber a day, but that's not feeding your microbiome, and so if you don't feed it, it's not going to grow. So really increasing the plants that you eat, so that's vegetables. Root vegetables are better than anything growing above the ground. They have more fiber in them. Fruit, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, legumes, lentils, whole grains, all of these products have like lots of different fibers in them. And you need to eat diversity, because you have so many different little species of bacteria in you. They all do different things. They all produce different metabolites. So if you just eat the same vegetables all of the time, you're only feeding a certain subset of them. Whereas if you eat diversity, and that's why we say 30 different plants, then you're feeding a much wider range of them. And so therefore you're going to have all these good metabolites, because it's actually not about the bacteria at all. It's actually about the byproducts that they produce. That's why we want to have the bacteria, because we want to have what they produce, and they produce all these metabolites. And if you're missing certain strains of them, then you're going to be missing those metabolites, and those metabolites have health functions in your body. I always call like your microbiome almost like your internal pharmacy. So these little bacteria are just busy making all these drugs, natural things in our system that actually has health outcomes. But if you're missing certain subsets, then you can't produce that product that they are actually making. And they make all sorts of, you know, from neurotransmitters, like I said, to B vitamins, to short chain fatty acids, to, you know, loads of different things. But if you're missing certain subsets, then you're missing those metabolites that they produce. And that's why we see certain people having, you know, it plays out differently in their body. So all you want to do is get it supercharged back, do a 12-week program of Simprove, and then maintain it. And how you maintain it is through the food that you eat, lots of fiber. Try and reduce the stress as much as you can, because high cortisol levels have a negative impact on your microbiome. Try and get your 7 or 8 hours sleep, because if you don't, that has a negative impact on your microbiome. Antibiotics are absolutely the worst thing for your microbiome. After every antibiotic, you need to supercharge your microbiome again. PPIs, you know, and loads of people take PPIs. These are protein pump inhibitors, you know, medications like Nexium, Losec, Pantene, all these things that people take for excess acid. So when you take a PPI, what they do is it neutralizes obviously the acid in your stomach, so your stomach doesn't produce as much acid, and that's how it has a beneficial effect. However, by doing that, it basically allows for more bad bacteria that might be on the food that you eat or in your mouth getting into your stomach and through your stomach, because it doesn't have as much acid to kill those bacteria. And as a result, we see this very often. You hear, Dominique, SIBO. So it's a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So this is when people actually have this overgrowth of bad bacteria in their small intestine, which then can lead to leaky gut. Or you can get an overgrowth of a particular bacteria in your stomach called Helicobacter, and then you need triple therapy to get rid of that or whatever, because people take PPIs for way too much longer than what they actually should do, because that actually has a negative impact then on your microbiome. Okay. And there's loads of other medicines like ibuprofen, which is very common over the counter, you know, these anti-inflammatories, they have a negative effect on your gut lining. So there's so many medicines that we take that you don't really realize.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what affect it. And say if I was to take an antibiotic now, would I double shot if I normally take? Yeah, I should take a double shot, because I know if I have to go on an antibiotic, I have to completely stop my biologic drug until the antibiotic is in my system. I'm not really sure why I have to do that, but I remember I had to do it before. But I should double shot Simprove while I'm on that antibiotic.
Yeah, I would either double shot it, or actually I asked this question of one of the researchers in the UK when I was last over, and he said that actually the best thing to do is, if you're on an antibiotic twice a day, you take 2 shots of Simprove a day. Okay. If you're on it 3 times a day, you take a shot with each antibiotic. Now, we always say you take your shot of Simprove first thing in the morning, and wait 10 minutes to get the bacteria through your stomach. So if you think about that, and just say you're on an antibiotic 3 times a day, the best thing to do is do your normal shot as normal, wait your 10 minutes, then you can take your antibiotic. Then say you're taking another antibiotic at lunchtime, don't eat for 2 hours. So you have to leave your food and coffee and tea, a break for 2 hours, so that the acid in your stomach reduces down to almost like when you would wake up in the morning, Dominique. And then you take another shot of Simprove, wait 10 minutes and take another antibiotic. Okay. And then repeat that. Yeah, so that is the best way to do it. However, that is difficult to remember, especially when you're on the go and working and stuff like that. So what I'll often say is just double shot in the morning, because you're loading up your bacteria with, or your microbiome with more bacteria, because there's 10 billion of them in every shot of Simprove. So like taking another shot, you can actually drink a whole bottle of Simprove, Dominic. It's not going to cause you any harm. Okay. Because there's no drug in it or anything. It's just the bacteria that naturally occur in your gut that you're lacking. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's obviously expensive. You're drinking a whole bottle every day, but you know, you're not going to do that. But it won't cause you any harm. It won't cause you any harm.
Okay. And I just have a couple more people asked questions for you. Yeah. So someone said, how does it work compared to other gut health supplements? And I know this is because it's water-based compared to other ones, but you would obviously be able to describe this a lot better than me.
Yeah. So basically, when you take, like most other supplements are either in a yogurt drink. Yeah, we know these are what they call it in the supermarket shelves, in a yogurt drink, or in a capsule or a powder form. That's most other ones. So when they're in a yogurt drink, okay, first of all, there's yogurt there. So when you drink the yogurt, your stomach will produce acid straight away. And so as a result, the bacteria in those drinks, well, first of all, they're full of sugar. That's the first thing to say. It's laden with sugar. But anyway, beside that point, your stomach produces acid at the first time when you take any food into it or any drink into it other than water. Your stomach just produces acid. That's because your stomach not only breaks down food, but it actually is there to protect your body. So if it thinks there's something coming in here that might be dangerous, its natural response is to produce acid. Yeah, and that acid is there to protect us, actually. So yogurt drinks, we know from the clinical evidence that Simprove actually tested 8 different probiotics to see whether, well, it wasn't Simprove, it was UCL that did this clinical study on it to actually see, first of all, what was bacterial content in all these probiotics? Did it actually stack up off what it said on the label? Only Simprove and the 2 yogurt drinks that was in that trial passed that test. Everything else in capsule form didn't even have the right amount of bacteria that it said and claimed on the label to be in it. That's the first thing. Then the second thing, the test that they did was, of all of these 8 different probiotics, which ones could survive the stomach acid. So they basically put a sample of each of them into acid type environment, which would be your stomach, and Simprove was the only one to pass that test. And then which one out of all of the 8, when they passed the stomach, so stayed in acid for 2 hours and then moved into an alkaline solution, which is basically what your large intestine is, do they grow again, or what happens, right? And basically Simprove grows and thrives again in that kind of environment, whereas the rest of them just didn't pass that test. So the key thing about any probiotic product, it has to get the bacteria through the stomach and into the large intestine. That is where your microbiome is. It's in the large intestine. It's not, so anything has to be effective, it has to get there. The big problem is, and the big challenge for any of these, is they have to be able to survive the stomach. And I have never seen, ever in my life, and I'm a pharmacist, and we always look for third-party testing data, not tested by the company, because of course the company, no matter what company, is going to tell you it's the best product on the market or whatever. So the thing I love about Simprove is that it's all backed by independent research and development. So they've gone to UCL or Sheffield Hallam University or King's College, or recently to Tallaght University Hospital. Professor Anthony O'Connor has done the first clinical study here in Ireland with Simprove on ulcerative.
He's my consultant.
Is he your consultant? Amazing guy, just amazing. So he actually gave half his patients Simprove and half a placebo to see actually what happened. And basically the long and the short was, obviously the patients on Simprove had a much better health improvements in terms of their symptoms, but particularly patients on Crohn's patients actually had a better response even than ulcerative colitis, Dominique, would you believe? So I'm going to do a live with him so he can come on and explain, how he did it and what he did and what was he looking for. But that's what I love about Simprove. It's all backed by independent research, and they publish everything. Even if something didn't work, they publish it as well. So they don't hide things that didn't work, that sort of way. So basically, out of all of that research, honestly, it's the only one that I've ever seen that actually gets a bacteria into the large intestine. Now, and why does it do that? Well, because the bacteria are in a liquid form, like you rightly said. So it's in water. So these bacteria are swimming around. You'll see them at the bottom. You have to shake it whenever you get it. But they're swimming around, and they've got some food substance in here to actually keep them alive and to grow. And what he's done is he's brought the pH of this product down to pH 4, which is the same acidic environment as your stomach. So whenever you drink Simprove, it's quite sharp to the taste, And the reason for that is it's fermenting, That's the first thing, and also that the content of this is quite acidic. So these bacteria are used to living in an acid-based environment, and so therefore they can survive it. They don't have to be brought back to life. Freeze-dried products that you find in capsules, they're freeze-dried. So they're like little bacteria that are frozen in time. All the water has been extracted out of them so that they can have a shelf life of 5 or 6 years. However, in order for them to be effective, they have to be reconstituted again. So they have to be kind of brought back to life, which basically means water needs to get into them, and then they start swimming around again so that they can work. But the big problem is, it's not water that they hit first, it's your stomach contents, and your stomach contents is acid, and that acid kills those bacteria. So very few of these bacteria actually make it through the stomach and get anywhere near the large intestine in the first place. So that's why we see massive improvements, and that is also, unfortunately, the downside of all of that is what makes Simprove expensive, because it can't be freeze-dried. It wouldn't work if it was freeze-dried. It can't last for 5 years in a warehouse shelf. It's not like the powders and the capsules. The bacteria are alive, they're swimming around, they can only make it in small batches as a result of that. They have to make it much more frequently, and unfortunately that increases the manufacturing cost, So now
it has to be refrigerated once you open.
Once you open it, air gets in, and that air starts to oxidize down the bacteria, and that's why we say put it into the fridge to slow that oxidization process down, Dominique. So you don't need to put all the bottles into the fridge.
Yeah, just the one that you've opened.
Yeah.
And then I'll just see if there's any more questions that were for you. So I think you've answered this one already. It was what benefits does Improve have on your gut health and how long before you start to see them? So
yeah. So the main benefits is like what you said at the beginning. Number one is reducing bloating, reducing cramps, because those cramps are as a result of gut motility issues, reducing pain, reducing those reflux kind of symptoms as well, and then getting the gut to work effectively. So it's your gut is just like your gut. First of all, people think it's just down below your belly button. It's actually from your gum to your bum. So it's that whole transition. And especially whenever you get out the other side of the stomach, it's like a big long tube, Dominique, and it just relaxes. It's a big smooth muscle, and it's just going like this the whole time and moving things along. But when it goes too fast, say for somebody like your good self who is maybe ulcerative colitis and might be going loose bowels, whatever, it's going like this. And for somebody who's got constipation, it's going really slow, and things then obviously is very sluggish and things can get backed up. So basically what Simprove will do through the action of optimizing the microbiome and getting those metabolites to actually take action on the smooth muscle cells, it starts to actually just regulate that action so it works properly. So you will see improvements. If you're constipated, you'll be less constipated, but if you have loose bowels, that'll slow down and you'll have regular bowel motions. So those are the main things that people see first, more the digestive improvements. Then most people will say that they have better energy, and that's simply because you can now break down your foods, because that's what these little bacteria do. Break down your foods, release the nutrients from it, get those nutrients into your bloodstream so then that you can fuel your body. But if you don't have a proper optimized microbiome, that's not happening. So you're not getting the proper breakdown of those nutrients and you're not getting the full benefit from the foods that you're actually eating. So it's, most people will say, I have much more energy on this. And then a lot of people will say that the changes to their skin. So a lot of people use Improve for any kind of inflammation of the skin, whether it be acne, whether it be eczema, rosacea, psoriasis, clears up like unbelievably well, dermatitis, so people will use it for that. And then so many people use it for the mental health benefits, because these little bacteria do produce all that serotonin. The serotonin then obviously travels the vagus nerve and gets into your circulation, and you have this, I suppose, elevated mood. So we know that by optimizing the gut microbiome, and like John Cryan did amazing work on this is really positive in terms of reducing inflammation in the brain. And inflammation in the brain, unfortunately, is associated with depression, anxiety. It can actually even be associated with precipitation of, symptoms that are related to ADHD or ASD as well. So, reducing inflammation in the brain is a very positive thing to do for anybody who has, any kind of mental health issues. But that inflammation usually is coming from the inflammation in your gut, because these two things are connected via the vagus nerve. We have 12 cranial nerves in our entire body, 11 stop at our shoulders, for our sight, our hearing, our taste, and all of the rest. But the main one actually travels, is like the trunk of a tree, and it attaches your brain to your gut. That's called the gut-brain axis. And then all your other nerves go out from that vagus nerve to, your liver and your lungs and everything else. So stimulating that vagus nerve is really, really important in order to calm you down in the first place. So it turns you into kind of like from sympathetic, that nervous fight and flight state, into parasympathetic nervous state. And we now know, like when I was in college, people always, our lecturers would say, your brain sends messages to your gut through the vagus nerve, but actually 5 times more messages go from your gut to your brain. So it's like the M50, there's messages going up and down non-stop, like as if, they're texting each other non-stop, 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. Your gut microbes are producing metabolites that travel that vagus nerve, that has an impact on your brain. And then your brain is producing lots of neurotransmitters, and all that neuron activity is connected to your gut. That's why we call your gut your second brain. There's 500 million neurons in your gut, so it has this intuition, and that's what they say, trust your gut. Yeah, that's exactly what they say, trust your gut. So a lot of people will say that they actually notice, they stay on Improve, Dominic. They might start it for gut problems, but they end up staying on it for the mental health benefits. They feel a lot better. They feel their mood, they feel lighter in themselves, you know, they just feel happier. And you'll see that in our reviews if anybody wants to have a little look at the reviews and see what people say. And in terms of how long does it take for people to see a benefit, unfortunately, we don't know how unbalanced, you know, your own microbiome. Yeah, because you can't kind of look in there and see and kind of go, oh gosh, you're down to 20% and you're down to 40%. It's these bacteria are invisible. You can go and get a microbiome test and do a stool test and send it off for analysis. Generally speaking, what that will show you is what you're lacking, not necessarily how many bacteria you have. So you just don't know. So for some people, it might, you'll see an improvement in 2 weeks because their glass might be up to 3/4 full, if that makes sense. And so it's going to take a shorter time for them to be optimized, whereas other people who may have been on several different antibiotics, who live a very stressful life, who eat a lot of ultra processed food, which play havoc with your microbiome, then they could be down to 20%. And so it's going to take them maybe 6 to 8 weeks before they see the benefit. So all I would say is, if you're going to make the commitment, get the 12-week program, because we know the clinical research shows it takes 12 weeks to really optimize your gut. Do the 12 weeks, be committed, make sure you take it properly first thing in the morning, wait the 10 minutes before you eat or drink anything, because that protects the little bacteria and make sure that they get into the small intestine, and then as a result into the large intestine. And then thirdly, feed them the fiber that they want, because if you do that, you will see much better benefits. So many people say to me, oh, I'm taking this, I'm not seeing the benefits, I'm not seeing what the reviews are saying. When I talk to them through DMs, Dominique, and we talk about their fiber intake, I can tell you now, they might be taking half the fiber that they should take. So if you're not taking the fiber in, you are not feeding the bacteria what they need, and so therefore they can't multiply and produce these metabolites. So really look at your fiber intake. If you've tried some improvement before in the past and you know you sort of thought, oh gosh, it worked but not brilliant, or I'm not seeing those massive improvements, look at your fiber intake. It makes a huge difference if you can do that. And people struggle with getting that fiber in because, you know, I'm sure you were avoiding certain foods, Dominic.
I was actually told to avoid fiber when I was originally diagnosed because that was obviously having a different effect on me, because I wanted to go less frequently, and fiber, they said, normally helps people with constipation and the likes. So I was put on a low residue diet at the time. So like for people that are put on that type of diet, like would you try and get fiber through like vitamins, or like what should you do with that, like if you're trying to take a low fiber diet? I don't now, and I'm grand now, but at the time that's what I was.
So what I would say to, so you can get fiber in different forms, Dominic, right? And so you can have soluble fibers and insoluble fibers, and it's really insoluble fibers that your good self should avoid, or people even with diverticulitis, which is a condition where you have these little pouches in your gut, and sometimes if you take like a lot of insoluble fibers, say with nuts and seeds, they can actually get trapped in those little pouches, and as a result then they can lie in there and become infected, and then that can really lead to a flare-up of their condition. So we say avoid insoluble fibers in that case. However, you can get soluble fiber, that you can dissolve in water, and it's completely totally soluble. So a great one that I always recommend, if you're, and even for people who struggle to take that optimum amount of fiber a day, because it is difficult to go from what you have been doing right up to that level. So cauliflower is the one that I often recommend. It comes in all these different flavors, Dominic. You can use it for baking, you can put it into like whatever you're making. There's a plain one, you can hide it like in food, so you can stir it into your pasta and you wouldn't even know you have it, or you can dissolve it in a glass of water and just drink it back, and that won't irritate your gut at all, even for the likes of yourself. But that fiber will feed those bacteria in your gut, and as a result you'll see much faster results by feeding the bacteria. And just to say, like, they love fiber, Dominic, the good bacteria. In order to produce good metabolites, you need to feed the good bacteria. The thing that feeds the bad bacteria, which unfortunately produce bad metabolites that cause all of this inflammation in your gut and get all these things to seep out into your body, which cause inflammation elsewhere in the body. So those bad bacteria, they love sugar. and they love ultra processed foods. You know, all those additives and preservatives and emulsifiers that we take in ultra processed foods, that causes inflammation in the gut, Dominique. And I'm sure you know from eating certain foods that are just
what would trigger it, like,
what are triggered. Exactly. So all your body is doing there, your body's super clever. If it takes in something that has like a load of preservatives in it, it kind of goes like, this is not natural. What is this? And so it attacks that. You know, it's almost like it thinks it's like some sort of a virus or some sort of a bacteria that shouldn't be in this body. So it's the normal body's response to that is go and attack that, and that causes inflammation in the gut, which then, if you've got ulcerative colitis or IBS or Crohn's or anything, causes more inflammation, which actually makes your symptoms worse. So really and truly, if you have any inflammatory gut problems, but not even gut problems, inflammatory problems anywhere else in your body, you really need to look at avoiding ultra processed foods. And what I say is just look at the ingredients on the back of the packets. You know, we see Sophie Morris doing amazing work around this now, you know, calling out all of these, like, what are these things? Supermarkets, whatever. So just looking at the labels and kind of going, actually, I don't recognize these. I can't find these in my, you know, in my kitchen cupboard. If you can't find it in your kitchen cupboard, then it's usually an artificial preservative or emulsifier or whatever. And you really should be thinking about cutting down that. I know we're not all perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, and you can't do it all of the time, but really trying to eliminate as many of those ultra processed foods as possible is really, really important. Really important.
Okay. I think maybe that is all of the questions answered. Somebody just asked what aspects of your life can affect your gut microbiome. I think that's the last one.
Yeah, I would say like high stress, you know. So when you live a very stressful life, you're constantly in fight or flight, and your body is really high cortisol levels and usually adrenaline, because your body thinks it's in danger, and so it's sending all of this, you know, blood and activity towards your muscles to kind of like run away or whatever, and your cortisol levels are really, really high. Well, that high cortisol levels has a very negative effect on your microbiome as well, and will cause inflammation. So just to be really aware of, I suppose, that the negative effects of constantly being in that fight and flight. And of course, like, you know, we don't have like tigers chasing us like years ago. Whenever we'd go into that fight or flight, it's usually emails, or it's a work environment, or, you know, it could be just people in our life that are real triggers for this now. So just being aware of what are your triggers and doing everything you can to get yourself out of that fight or flight and into what we call rest and digest. That's your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's this whole stimulation, as I said before, of stimulating your vagus nerve. And you can do that loads of different ways. Improving your microbiome will do that because it produces all these little metabolites that stimulate it. But so will the likes of meditation, deep breathing, cold water therapy, Dominique, exercise, chanting, like the Oonagh monks do, gargling actually does, singing does, you know. So just tuning into the things that you like, that you know are good for you to stimulate that vagus nerve and get you out of that fight or flight and into parasympathetic. That rest and digest is super, super important, because that turns on your digestive system. It turns on your reproductive system as well. This is why we see so many women who are really struggling maybe to conceive, because they're constantly in this fight or flight, because your body, its little pituitary gland, it produces, as a result of that, it just thinks you're in danger, so it produces all this prolactin to protect you, because it's not safe to have a baby. And as a result of that, you know, your body, sometimes women don't even ovulate, you know, whenever it gets so stressful like that. So just really tuning into your body to kind of know whenever you are in fight or flight, and to know, like we said earlier, it's not normal to stay in that all of the time. So you need to get yourself out of that, because that can be a massive, massive trigger to a negative microbiome. And as a result of that, you know, real indigestion kind of symptoms, because your body thinks, okay, I just need to run out of here. I need all the blood to go to my heart, all the blood to go to my lungs, so that my breathing can increase, my heart rate can increase, and blood go to my muscles so I can run out of here. I'm in fight or flight. And it diverts all of the blood supply and the nerve supply away from your digestive, because it's like, it's not the time to break down food now, and also your reproductive system. So you want to kind of to turn that back on so that you can digest your food and turn back on your normal cycle, you need to get yourself into parasympathetic nervous state. So just really tuning into that, it would be another thing that I think that we probably just don't know enough about. And I think that people don't understand what's going on in their body that much or whatever around that. But it can make a massive, massive difference if you just take some time out, and whether it be deep breathing, whether it be meditation, whether it be cold water therapy, whatever suits you, like just get into that and give yourself permission every day to do a little bit of that so you're getting those cortisol levels down.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose before we go, we'd want to mention that there is a discount available on Mars Pharmacy at the moment with 25% off the 4 and the 12-week program. Do they need a discount code or anything?
No,
it's just automatically applied.
Go onto the website. Absolutely, there's 25% off there. It will be on offer until the end of the month. Microbiome Day is, I think, on Thursday. So it'll run up until the 30th of the month, Dominique, and if anybody is around tomorrow night, we are going to have at this event in Smock Alley. There's a couple of tickets left from 7 to 9. We're going to have 6 speakers. Actually, Amy from Colitis Crohn's Ireland.
Yeah, I saw there. That.
Yeah, she's an amazing girl. And again, like you, really young, got a diagnosis similar to yourself, had no idea what was going on. Took nearly a year and a half to get a diagnosis. You know, and I think she'll probably tell her own story and then why she went and worked for Colitis Crohn's Ireland, you know, because the scary thing there is that I think her statistics are like over 80% of people who have colitis or Crohn's have bleeding from the back passage and every day, but don't do anything about it. They're so scared to go to the doctor about that. And I don't know if that's just a fear, you don't want to hear the worst, or, you know, or you think maybe that's normal, maybe everybody has that or whatever. But like, this is the type of thing that she's trying to highlight from an awareness campaign to say, that's not normal. You need to go straight away, and really trying to call on, I suppose, government and policymakers to shorten that time to get a diagnosis as well, because very often
a year and a half is such a long time to be diagnosed with. Like mine was fairly quick, which I think I'm lucky that it was, because my symptoms were so severe at the time. But a year and a half is such a long time to wait, not knowing what it is.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, in fairness to him in Tala Hospital, did you go to see him in Tala?
Yeah.
So he's actually done something really clever, which I don't think any other hospital has done, and fair play to him. So he's basically kind of prioritized patients. So when everybody comes into hospital, it's not, very often it's like in date order. So you're like, you know, you're seen as in a queue, I suppose, in date order. But he's actually changed that on its head in Tala, where it's certain patients with certain symptoms see a dietitian, because it's less severe symptoms. But patients who maybe go into the bathroom a huge amount of times or bleeding from the back passage or whatever, they're prioritized and they get fast tracked to see the consultant. So actually he's been able to manage to reduce waiting lists by simply changing the
things around it.
Yeah, exactly. Very clever. And listen, other hospitals probably should do the same thing there, because it's definitely a model. Like, we hear this all of the time, that his patients are seen quicker, and as a result, like you said in the beginning, once you know, you know, nobody wants to get any type of diagnosis, but it's great to get it, because at least then you can have a plan.
Yeah.
At least you know what you have, and once you know what you have and the diagnosis, you can always develop a plan, and that's the most important thing, you know.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. Yeah.
So I'm going to save this down now, because obviously there was a lot of information in there, and I know people watching probably mightn't have watched from the very beginning. So I'm going to, when I cancel this off, save it down so people can come back and watch it on my page. And I don't know, is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No, just if anybody didn't want to ask a question publicly, then very often we see that. Honestly, just send me a DM. Dominic, you can tag me afterwards, whatever.
Yeah.
Because honestly, if you're suffering and you have any of these symptoms, you feel whatever, for whatever reason, embarrassed or whatever, don't be embarrassed. There's always help there. And there's amazing people, amazing consultants like Anthony out there that are just fantastic at what they do. It's all about access to that expertise. So then once you get that access, you'll be able to get a plan that will control these symptoms, and you'll be able to live a very normal life, like you are clearly doing, Dominic, you know, where you can go to the beach
makes
again.
Such a difference. Yeah,
and makes a massive difference. And something so simple as adjusting your microbiome can have a radical change. Obviously you're going to need your medications if you've got ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, whatever, but adding in something like this, as well as the changes to your diet and just your lifestyle in general, can make a huge difference to your outcomes. So
Yeah.
don't be disillusioned. There's always hope, and there's always a clear pathway, is what I would say, and we're here to help in any way we can, and to direct you if you need further help, whether that be a GP or whether that be a consultant. We can help there as well.
Yeah, that was so good. Thanks for chatting today.
Not at all. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, thank you. All right.
Okay. So I'll go save this down and it'll be on my page.
Great. And I'll
Okay.
repost it as well. See
Okay.
you,
Bye.
Dominique. Thanks a million. All right. God
Bye.
bless. Night night.